The crystal chandelier swayed above her head like a guillotine made of light. Clara Whitmore stood frozen in the center of the ballroom, every eye drilling into her skin, as Duke Dorian Blackthorn's gloved hand gripped hers with the finality of a death sentence. "She will be my wife," he announced, his voice cutting through the orchestra's whine. The room exploded into gasps. Clara's breath stopped. She didn't know this man. She'd never even spoken to him. Yet here she was, claimed, marked, ruined, in front of everyone who'd spent years pretending she didn't exist. Want to know how a nobody became untouchable? Stay till the end. Drop a like, comment your city, and let me see how far this story travels. The first mistake Clara made that night wasn't the dress. Though her mother had insisted it was all wrong, too plain, too modest, too her. No, the mistake was believing she had any control left. She stood near the marble column at the edge of the Ashford ballroom, half hidden by shadow and the broad shoulders of men who didn't bother to notice her. The air reeked of imported perfume and desperation. Voices rose and fell in practiced laughter, sharp as the clink of champagne flutes. Clara had been to a dozen of these events in the past 2 months. She hated every single one. "Miss Whitmore." Her mother's voice sliced through her thoughts like a razor through silk. Clara turned. Eleanor Whitmore approached with the grace of a woman who'd spent 40 years perfecting her posture and 20 more resenting it. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "You're hiding again." "I'm observing," Clara said. "You're wasting time." Eleanor's fingers closed around Clara's wrist, cold and insistent. "Lord Pembroke is here. He asked about you." Clara's stomach turned. Lord Pembroke was 60, twice widowed, and had a reputation for collecting young wives the way other men collected hunting trophies. "I'm not interested." "Interest is a luxury you can't afford." Eleanor's grip tightened. "You're 23, Clara. Do you understand what that means?" She did. She understood perfectly. In their world, 23 was a cliff's edge. 23 was a warning label. 23 meant the market had looked you over, found you lacking, and moved on to fresher options. "I won't marry him," Clara said quietly. Eleanor's face hardened. "Then who?" "Tell me, darling, because your father's patience isn't infinite. The debts won't pay themselves. We've already sold the country house. Do you want us to lose everything?" The words landed like stones in Clara's chest, each one precisely aimed. This was the script they'd been performing for months now. Clara, the disappointing daughter, Eleanor, the martyr mother, both of them circling the same ugly truth. The Whitmore name meant nothing without money, and the money was gone. "I'll find someone," Clara said, though she had no idea how. "Find someone tonight," Eleanor said, then released her wrist and glided away, already scanning the room for better prospects. Clara exhaled slowly. Her wrist throbbed where her mother's nails had pressed into skin. Around her, the ball continued its relentless performance. Daughters displayed like merchandise, mothers negotiating like brokers, men evaluating with the casual cruelty of buyers at an auction. She hated it, all of it. "You look like you're contemplating murder." Clara startled. The voice came from her left. A young woman in emerald silk, dark hair piled high, lips curved in amusement. Lady Vivian Hale. They'd been introduced once, briefly, at another forgettable event. "Just considering my options," Clara said. Vivian laughed, a real sound, not the manufactured trill most women deployed at parties. "Your options being Lord Pembroke or a convent?" "Something like that." "Choose the convent," Vivian said, leaning closer. "I've met Pembroke's last wife." "Well, met her ghost. Poor thing barely lasted 2 years before she drank herself into an early grave." Clara felt the floor tilt slightly beneath her feet. "That's not a comfort." "It's not meant to be. It's a warning." Vivian's expression shifted, grew serious. "This world eats women like us, Clara. The ones who don't fit the mold, the ones who think too much. You need to be smarter than they expect." "I'm trying." "Try harder." Vivian glanced over her shoulder, then back. "And whatever you do, don't make eye contact with Blackthorn. He's here tonight." Clara blinked. "Who?" "Duke Dorian Blackthorn." Vivian's voice dropped. "The man every mother warns her daughter about. Brilliant, ruthless, and utterly uninterested in playing society's games. He showed up an hour ago, and half the room nearly fainted." Clara had heard the name. Everyone had. Blackthorn was a legend wrapped in rumors. He'd inherited his title young. after his father's sudden death, and had spent the last decade turning a crumbling duchy into a financial empire. People said he was brutal in business, merciless with enemies, and completely indifferent to public opinion. Why would I need to avoid him? Clara asked. Vivienne raised an eyebrow. Because men like that don't notice women like us unless they want something. And when they do, it's never anything good. Before Clara could respond, the music shifted. The orchestra began a waltz, and couples flooded the floor in a coordinated swarm of silk and superficiality. Clara watched them spin, feeling like a ghost at her own life. She should move, circulate, smile at eligible men and pretend she cared about their opinions on horse breeding and politics. That's what her mother would demand. That's what survival required. But she couldn't make herself move. Instead, she turned toward the tall windows overlooking the garden, seeking air, space, anything to break the suffocating weight pressing down on her lungs. That's when she saw him. Dorian Blackthorne stood near the far end of the ballroom, partially obscured by a cluster of fawning aristocrats. He was taller than she'd expected, shoulders broad beneath an immaculately tailored black coat. His hair was dark, swept back, and his face, sharp jaw, high cheekbones, eyes that seemed to catalog everything without giving anything away, was the kind that belonged on marble statues, not living men. He wasn't smiling, wasn't pretending, just standing there like a predator tolerating the presence of prey because it amused him. And then, as if sensing her stare, his gaze shifted. Their eyes met. Clara's breath caught. It wasn't attraction, not exactly. It was more like recognition. The way you might feel when you realize you're standing too close to the edge of a cliff. He didn't look away. Neither did she. The moment stretched, taut and strange, until someone stepped between them, Lord Ashford probably, or another title-heavy nobody desperate for Blackthorne's attention. The connection broke. Clara exhaled, her pulse hammering in her throat. What the hell was that? She turned away quickly, weaving through the crowd toward the terrace doors. She needed air, needed to think, needed to stop feeling like she'd just made a terrible mistake without knowing what it was. The terrace was blessedly empty. The cool night air hit her face, sharp and clean. Clara gripped the stone railing and stared out at the manicured gardens, trying to steady her breathing. Running already? She spun around. Dorian Blackthorne stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. Clara's heart slammed against her ribs. No, I just needed air. Convenient. He stepped onto the terrace, and suddenly the space felt much smaller. You were staring at me. Heat flooded her cheeks. I wasn't. You were. He moved closer, and Clara resisted the urge to step back. I don't mind, but I'm curious why. She forced herself to hold his gaze. Up close, his eyes were gray, storm cloud gray, the kind that promised rain and ruin. I heard your name tonight. I was curious. About what? Whether the rumors are true. His mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile. Which rumors? That you're dangerous. I am. No hesitation, no false modesty, just fact, delivered like a weather report. Clara's throat tightened. She should leave, should walk past him, rejoin the ball, find her mother and apologize and play the role expected of her. But something kept her rooted in place, some reckless, self-destructive part of her that wanted to see what happened next. Why are you here? She asked. Obligation. He tilted his head slightly, studying her. You? Same. Liar. The word hit like a slap. Clara bristled. Excuse me? You're here because someone's forcing you, Blackthorne said. Mother? Father? Debt? All three? She stared at him, stunned by the casual cruelty of the observation and the accuracy. You don't know anything about me. I know more than you think. He stepped closer, and now she could smell him, something clean and sharp, like winter air. Clara Whitmore, 23, unmarried, family's drowning in debt. Your father gambled away most of the fortune, and your mother's scrambling to marry you off before everyone realizes you're broke. The words carved through her like knives. Clara's hands shook. How? I make it my business to know things. His voice was calm, almost gentle. Information is currency. And you, Miss Whitmore, are worth more than you realize. I'm worth nothing, she said bitterly. Everyone knows that. Society knows that, he corrected. Society is stupid. Clara laughed, a short, sharp sound that hurt her throat. And you're not? I'm practical. He reached into his coat and pulled out a card, held it between two fingers. I have a proposal. She didn't take the card. I'm not interested in your proposals. You haven't heard it yet. I don't need to. Men like you don't make proposals. You make transactions. Smart. He looked genuinely pleased. That's exactly what this is. Then I'm definitely not interested. Your mother's talking to Lord Pembroke right now, Blackthorne said, and Clara's stomach dropped. In 10 minutes, she's going to come find you and insist you dance with him. In 20, she'll have negotiated a courtship. In a month, you'll be engaged. You're lying. Look. Against her better judgment, Clara turned toward the ballroom. Through the glass doors, she could see her mother deep in conversation with Pembroke, both of them glancing toward the terrace. Toward her. No. The word came out strangled. Or, Blackthorne said quietly, you could accept my proposal. Clara turned back to him, desperation clawing at her chest. What proposal? Marry me instead. The world tilted. Clara stared at him, certain she'd misheard. What? Marry me, he repeated as calmly as if he were discussing the weather. Publicly, tonight. Announce the engagement before your mother can sell you to Pembroke. That's insane. It's strategic. I don't even know you. You know enough. He pocketed the card. I need a wife for political reasons. Something to soften my reputation, stabilize alliances. You need an escape from poverty in Pembroke. It's a fair trade. Clara's mind reeled. This couldn't be real. Men didn't just propose to strangers on terraces. This was madness. Why me? She managed. Because you're smart enough to see the advantage, he said, and desperate enough to take it. The cruelty of the statement should have made her furious. Instead, it landed like truth. She was desperate, cornered, running out of options. But this? I won't be your transaction, she said. You already are, Blackthorne said. The only question is whether you choose the buyer. Clara's hands clenched into fists. She wanted to scream at him, slap him, tell him to go to hell. But her mother was inside making deals with Pembroke. Her father was probably drunk in his study, oblivious. Her future was collapsing in real time. If I say yes, she said slowly, what happens? We announce the engagement tonight. You move to my estate within the week. We marry within the month. You fulfill your role as Duchess. Public appearances, social obligations, nothing complicated. In exchange, your family's debts disappear. You get security, status, freedom from this. He gestured toward the ballroom. Circus. And you get what? A decorative wife? I get legitimacy, he said bluntly. My reputation scares people. A wife makes me look stable, human, less likely to burn their estates to the ground. Would you? If necessary. She believed him. Clara looked at the ballroom, then back at Blackthorne. This was insane, reckless, the kind of decision that ended badly in every story ever told, but every other option ended worse. One condition, she said. He raised an eyebrow. Bold. I'm serious. If I do this, I'm not a decoration. I'm not a prop in your political theater. I want... She hesitated, then pushed forward. Respect, partnership. Not affection, not love, but basic human respect. Blackthorne considered this, then nodded. Done. Just like that? I don't make promises I can't keep. He extended his hand. Do we have a deal? Clara stared at his hand, long fingers, calloused palm, steady and sure. This was it. The moment everything changed. She took his hand. His grip was firm, warm, final. We have a deal, she said. Good. He didn't let go. Then let's make it official. Before she could ask what he meant, Blackthorne turned and led her back into the ballroom, his hand still holding hers. The music was still playing. The crowd was still spinning. Nobody noticed them at first. Then Blackthorne stopped in the center of the dance floor. The music stuttered. Couples stumbled to a halt. Conversations died mid-sentence. Clara's heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Blackthorne raised their joined hands. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade through silk, I'd like to introduce you to my future wife. The ballroom exploded. Gasps, shouts. Her mother's face went white. Pembroke looked like he'd been struck. Vivian's eyes went wide with shock and something that might have been admiration. Clara stood frozen, Blackthorn's hand the only solid thing in a world that had just shattered into chaos. "What have I done?" she whispered. Blackthorn leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. "Survived." The crowd surged forward, questions, accusations, disbelief crashing over them like waves. Clara's mother pushed through, face twisted in fury and confusion. "Clara, what is the meaning of— The engagement is official," Blackthorn said calmly. "Miss Whitmore has accepted my proposal. I trust you'll offer your congratulations." Eleanor looked between them, lips trembling. For once, she had no words. Clara felt a hysterical laugh building in her chest. This was madness, beautiful, terrible madness, and she'd just chosen it. Blackthorn's hand tightened around hers, a silent message. "We're in this now. Don't flinch." So Clara lifted her chin, straightened her spine, and met her mother's horrified gaze with something she hadn't felt in years. Defiance. "Congratulate us, Mother," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos roaring in her ears. "I'm getting married." The carriage ride back to the Whitmore estate was the longest hour of Clara's life. Her mother sat across from her in stony silence, lips pressed into a bloodless line. Her father snored softly in the corner, too drunk to process what had happened. Clara stared out the window at the dark streets, her mind spinning in circles. "What have I done? What have I done? What have I done? You've ruined us." Eleanor's voice was flat, dead. Clara turned to face her. "I've saved us." "Saved us?" Her mother's laugh was bitter. "You accepted a proposal from a man you don't know in front of half of London society without consulting your family. Do you have any idea what people are saying?" "I don't care what people are saying." "Then you're a fool." Eleanor leaned forward, eyes blazing. "Blackthorn is dangerous, Clara. Everyone knows it. He's destroyed men for less than looking at him wrong. And you just agreed to marry him on a whim." "It wasn't a whim," Clara said quietly. "It was a choice." "Between what? Him or Pembroke?" "Between him or nothing." Clara's voice hardened. "You were negotiating my marriage to Pembroke without even asking me. At least Blackthorn gave me a choice." Eleanor's face crumpled. For a moment she looked old, tired, and scared. "I was trying to protect you. You were trying to save yourself." The words hung in the air between them, sharp and true. Her mother looked away. The carriage rolled to a stop. Clara didn't wait for the footman. She pushed the door open herself and climbed out into the cold night. The Whitmore townhouse loomed above her, all its windows dark except for one. Her father would drink himself unconscious. Her mother would retreat to her room and weep, or rage, or both. And Clara would pack. Because in 3 days she'd be leaving this house forever. She should feel scared, regretful, something. Instead, she felt light. For the first time in years, she'd made a decision that was entirely hers. Reckless, yes. Dangerous, absolutely. But hers. And that was worth something. Clara climbed the steps to the townhouse, paused at the door, and looked back at the street. Somewhere across London, in a house she'd never seen, Dorian Blackthorn was probably working, signing documents, planning strategies, building his empire with the same cold precision he'd used to trap her tonight. She should hate him for it, but she didn't, because he'd given her something nobody else had. A way out. And Clara Whitmore was done being caged. The letter arrived on the second morning. Clara found it on the breakfast table, propped against the sugar bowl like a small bomb waiting to detonate. Her mother hadn't come down yet, probably still locked in her room, nursing yesterday's humiliation with laudanum and spite. Her father was somewhere in the house, avoiding both of them. Clara picked up the envelope. Heavy paper. Black wax seal pressed with a crest she didn't recognize. A raven clutching a sword. Blackthorn. Her hands trembled as she broke the seal. "Miss Whitmore, a carriage will collect you tomorrow at noon. Bring only what matters. Everything else will be provided. DB." That was it. No pleasantries, no reassurance, just orders delivered with the emotional warmth of a military dispatch. Clara set the letter down, her stomach twisting. This was real. Actually happening. In 24 hours, she'd leave this house and step into a life she couldn't begin to imagine. She should eat something, should pack, should do 100 practical things. Instead, she sat frozen at the empty table, staring at the letter until the words blurred. Is that from him? Clara's head snapped up. Her mother stood in the doorway, still in her dressing gown, hair loose around her shoulders. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. Yes, Clara said. Eleanor moved closer, her slippers whispering against the floor. What does it say? I'm leaving tomorrow. Her mother's face didn't change. So soon. Apparently, silence settled between them, heavy and awkward. Clara waited for the lecture, the recriminations, the inevitable breakdown, but Eleanor just stood there, staring at the letter like it was written in a language she couldn't read. I tried, her mother said finally. I know you don't believe that, but I did. I tried to give you options. Pembroke wasn't an option, Clara said quietly. He was a sentence. And Blackthorn isn't? Clara didn't have an answer for that. Eleanor sank into the chair across from her, suddenly looking every one of her 47 years. When I married your father, I thought I was choosing freedom. He was charming, handsome, from a good family. I thought... She stopped, shook her head. It doesn't matter what I thought. The point is I was wrong, and now here we are. This isn't the same, Clara said. Isn't it? Her mother's eyes were sharp despite the exhaustion. You're marrying a stranger for security. How is that different? Because I chose it. Did you? Or did he just give you a prettier cage? The question hit harder than Clara wanted to admit. She picked up the letter, folded it carefully. I don't know yet, but at least it's a different cage. Her mother laughed, a sad, brittle sound. That's something, I suppose. They sat in silence for a while longer. Two women who'd never quite understood each other, bound by blood and circumstance and nothing else. Finally, Eleanor stood. I'll send Mary to help you pack. Thank you. Her mother paused at the door, one hand on the frame. Whatever happens, Clara, whatever he is, don't lose yourself. That's the real danger. Not cruelty or neglect, just disappearing into someone else's story until you forget you ever had your own. Then she was gone, leaving Clara alone with the letter and a hollow ache in her chest that felt uncomfortably like grief. The carriage that arrived the next day was obscenely elegant, all black lacquer and polished brass, pulled by 4 matched horses that looked like they cost more than the Whitmore townhouse. A driver in dark livery waited by the door, face impassive. Clara stood on the front steps with a single trunk beside her. Inside were her clothes, a few books, her mother's pearls, the only thing she owned that felt like hers. Everything else could burn for all she cared. Her father hadn't come to say goodbye. No surprise there. Her mother stood in the doorway, wrapped in a shawl, eyes red-rimmed but dry. They'd said everything there was to say last night, or maybe they'd said nothing at all. Either way, words felt useless now. Write to me, Eleanor said. Even if you hate me. Write. I will, Clara lied. The driver loaded her trunk with practiced efficiency. Clara took one last look at the house where she'd grown up. The peeling paint, the cracked steps, the windows that never quite closed properly. It had never been a home, just a holding cell. Good riddance. She climbed into the carriage without looking back. The interior was just as elegant as the exterior. Velvet seats, polished wood, small lamps that cast warm light despite the gray afternoon. Clara settled into the corner, pulling her cloak tight around her shoulders. The carriage lurched forward. London slid past the windows. Familiar streets giving way to unfamiliar ones. The city thinning at the edges until they were rolling through open countryside. Fields stretched in all directions, broken by stone walls and clusters of trees still bare from winter. Clara watched it all with detached curiosity. She'd never been this far from London, had never really been anywhere except the narrow circuit of ballrooms and drawing rooms that made up her world. That world was behind her now. She should feel something. Fear, maybe. Regret. Anticipation. Instead, she just felt numb. The journey took 3 hours. The sun was sliding toward the horizon when the carriage finally turned onto a long gravel drive lined with ancient oaks. Clara sat up straighter, peering through the window. And then she saw it. Blackthorn Estate. It wasn't what she'd expected. No Gothic monstrosity or crumbling ruin. Instead, the house rose from the landscape like it had grown there. Gray stone weathered by centuries, tall windows reflecting the dying light, ivy climbing the walls in deliberate patterns. It was massive but not ostentatious, powerful but restrained, like its owner. The carriage stopped in the circular courtyard. Before Clara could gather herself, the door opened and a woman in severe black appeared. "Miss Whitmore, I'm Mrs. Daventry, the housekeeper. Welcome to Blackthorn." Clara accepted the offered hand and stepped down. The air here tasted different, cleaner, sharper. She could smell earth and wood smoke and something else she couldn't name. "His Grace is expecting you," Mrs. Daventry said, already moving toward the entrance. "I'll show you to your rooms first. You'll want to refresh yourself before dinner." Clara followed, trying not to gawk like a tourist. The entrance hall was enormous. Flagstone floors, high ceilings, portraits of grim-faced blackthorns staring down from the walls. It should have felt oppressive. Instead, it felt solid, real. Mrs. Daventry led her up a wide staircase, down a corridor lined with closed doors, and finally into a suite of rooms that made Clara's breath catch. The bedroom was twice the size of her old one, with tall windows overlooking the grounds, a canopy bed that could sleep four, and a fireplace already crackling with warmth. Through an open door, she glimpsed a private sitting room and what looked like a bathing chamber. "Your things will be brought up shortly," Mrs. Daventry said. "Dinner is at 7. I'll send someone to fetch you." Then she was gone, closing the door with a soft click. Clara stood in the center of the room, slowly turning in a circle. This was hers. All of it, at least for now. She moved to the window and pressed her palm against the cold glass. The grounds stretched endlessly, formal gardens giving way to wilder parkland, a lake gleaming in the distance, forest dark against the horizon. Beautiful. Isolated. Inescapable. A prettier cage, her mother had said. Maybe. But Clara had lived in worse. Dinner was a minefield disguised as a meal. Clara had been led downstairs by a silent maid and deposited in a dining room that could have seated 40, but currently held only 2 place settings, one at the head of the table, one to its right. Blackthorn was already seated, reading through a stack of papers with the focused intensity of a man who'd forgotten food was supposed to be enjoyed, not endured. He looked up when she entered. "Miss Whitmore, Your Grace." The title felt strange in her mouth, formal, final. "Sit." It wasn't an invitation. Clara sat. A servant appeared immediately, pouring wine and setting out the first course, some kind of soup that smelled better than anything Clara had eaten in months. She picked up her spoon, watching Blackthorn from the corner of her eye. He'd gone back to his papers. They ate in silence for several minutes. Clara forced herself to finish the soup, though her stomach was too tight to really taste it. The next course arrived. Roasted game, vegetables she didn't recognize, bread still warm from the oven. Still no conversation. Finally, Clara set down her fork with more force than necessary. "Is this how meals usually go here?" Blackthorn glanced up. "What do you mean?" "Silent. Like we're strangers at an inn, not 2 people who are supposedly getting married." "We are strangers," he pointed out. Exactly my point. He set down his own fork, giving her his full attention for the first time since she'd arrived. "What would you like to discuss, Miss Whitmore?" "Anything. The estate, your work. Why you need a wife badly enough to propose to someone you'd never met." "I explained that already." "You gave me a reason. Not the whole story." His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Calculation, maybe, or reassessment. "You want the whole story?" "I think I'm entitled to it." "Entitled," he repeated, tasting the word. "Interesting choice." "Answer the question." Blackthorn leaned back in his chair, wineglass dangling from his fingers. "My father died 8 years ago, left me a title, an estate, and a catastrophic amount of debt. I've spent the last 8 years rebuilding, buying land, investing in industry, consolidating power. It's worked. Blackthorn is now one of the wealthiest duchies in England. And that kind of success makes enemies. Men who think I'm too young, too ruthless, too willing to ignore tradition. They've been looking for ways to undermine me, socially, politically, financially." He took a sip of wine. "A wife stabilizes things, makes me look less like a threat, and more like a normal man with normal ambitions." You're not a normal man, Clara said. No, but I can play one when necessary. He set down the glass. Your turn. My turn for what? The truth. Why did you really say yes? Clara hesitated. The honest answer felt too raw, too exposing. But he'd given her honesty, or something close to it. She owed him the same. Because I was tired of being powerless, she said quietly. My whole life has been other people making decisions for me. Where I go, what I wear, who I'm allowed to talk to. I was suffocating, and then you offered me a way out. It might not be freedom, but at least it's movement. Blackthorn studied her for a long moment. You know this won't be easy. I never expected easy. People will talk. They'll say I bought you, that you married me for money. They're already saying that. It will get worse. Let it. Clara lifted her chin. I stopped caring what people think the moment I accepted your proposal. Something that might have been approval flickered across his face. Good. Because the real work starts tomorrow. What work? Teaching you how to be a duchess. Clara's stomach sank. You thought I'd just parade you around a few parties and call it done? Blackthorn shook his head. This estate has tenants, staff, obligations. You'll need to manage the household, handle correspondence, represent Blackthorn interests at social functions. It's not a decorations job, Miss Whitmore. It's a partnership. That's what I wanted, Clara said, though her mouth had gone dry. Then you'll get it. He stood, signaling the end of the meal. Mrs. Daventry will start your training tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. Don't be late. He was already moving toward the door when Clara found her voice again. Wait. He paused, half-turned. You said partnership, Clara said. That means I get a say. In decisions. In how this works. Within reason. No, not within reason. Either it's a partnership or it's not. Blackthorn's jaw tightened. For a moment, Clara thought she'd pushed too far, that he'd remind her exactly how precarious her position was, how easily he could destroy her with a word. Instead, he nodded. Fine, but understand this. Partnership means accountability. If you fail, we both pay the price. I won't fail. We'll see. Then he was gone, leaving Clara alone in the cavernous dining room with half-eaten food and a stomach full of acid. This was her life now. Not a rescue, not an escape, a battlefield. And she'd just enlisted. The training started exactly as promised. 8 o'clock the next morning, Mrs. Daventry knocking on Clara's door with the relentless cheerfulness of a woman who'd seen 1,000 anxious new wives and had no patience for weakness. Up, Miss Whitmore. We have a great deal to cover. Clara had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, her mind spun through worst-case scenarios. Social disasters, financial ruin, Blackthorn realizing he'd made a terrible mistake and sending her back to London in disgrace. But she got up, got dressed, followed Mrs. Daventry downstairs like a prisoner headed for sentencing. The housekeeper led her to a bright office overlooking the gardens. Inside, the desk was covered with ledgers, correspondence, schedules, and what looked like building plans. This, Mrs. Daventry said, gesturing to the chaos, is your responsibility. Clara stared. All of it? The estate employs 63 people. There are 200 tenant families. We host 4 major social events per year, plus countless smaller gatherings. You'll oversee the household budget, approve expenditures, manage staff disputes, coordinate with suppliers, and represent His Grace at community functions. She paused. Questions? Where do I start? The ledgers? If you can't manage money, the rest doesn't matter. For the next 4 hours, Mrs. Daventry walked Clara through the estate's finances with the patience of a teacher and the precision of an accountant. Numbers swam before Clara's eyes: income from tenant rents, expenses for repairs and wages, investments in livestock and crops, debts owed and payments due. It was overwhelming, terrifying, and utterly fascinating. Clara had never been allowed near her family's finances. Her father kept them locked away like shameful secrets, and by the time she was old enough to ask questions, there was nothing left to manage anyway. But this was real power. The ability to see how an estate functioned, where money flowed, what kept hundreds of people fed and sheltered and employed. You're catching on quickly, Mrs. Daventry said, sounding surprised. Numbers make sense, Clara said, scanning a column of expenditures. They follow rules. not like people. The housekeeper's mouth twitched, almost a smile. His Grace said the same thing once. Clara looked up. Did he? When he first took over. He was 19, barely more than a boy, and his father had left him with a disaster. The staff expected him to fail. He didn't. She closed the ledger. He worked 18-hour days for 3 years straight, learned every aspect of the estate, made decisions no one else would make. Some of them were brutal. All of them were necessary. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to understand what you've married into. Mrs. Daventry's expression hardened. His Grace built this place from rubble. He won't tolerate anyone, wife or otherwise, who threatens that. If you want to survive here, you'll need to prove you're an asset, not a liability. The words should have stung. Instead, they felt clarifying. Then let's keep working, Clara said. Claridice. They worked through lunch. By mid-afternoon, Clara's head ached and her hand cramped from taking notes, but she'd absorbed more in 6 hours than she had in 6 years of useless finishing school. Mrs. Daventry finally closed the last ledger. That's enough for today. Tomorrow we'll start on correspondence and social obligations. Clara nodded, too exhausted to speak. She spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the estate, wandering through corridors lined with portraits and tapestries, discovering libraries and music rooms, and a conservatory full of plants she couldn't name. The house was beautiful in a stark, functional way. Nothing wasted, nothing purely decorative, like Blackthorne himself. She didn't see him all day. Apparently he kept offices in another wing, handling business she wasn't yet cleared to know about. Fine. She had enough to worry about. Dinner that night was slightly less excruciating. Blackthorne actually asked about her day, and Clara gave him a concise summary of what Mrs. Daventry had taught her. He listened without interruption, then nodded. Good. You'll meet the senior staff tomorrow. They'll be skeptical. Prove them wrong. How? By being better than they expect. He cut into his meal with surgical precision. Most society wives treat the staff like furniture. If you treat them like people, competent people who know more than you do, you'll earn their respect faster than any title could. It was the closest thing to advice he'd given her. Clara filed it away. After dinner, she retreated to her rooms and tried to read, but the words blurred together. Her mind kept drifting to the office downstairs, to the ledgers and lists and endless responsibilities waiting for her. This wasn't what she'd imagined when she'd accepted Blackthorne's proposal. She'd thought, what? That she'd live in luxury and attend parties and play the decorative duchess while someone else did the real work. Stupid, naive. Blackthorne had been clear from the start. This was a transaction, a partnership. She'd agreed to work for her security. And Clara Whitmore had never been afraid of work. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Clara met the senior staff, the butler, the head gardener, the estate manager, the cook. Mrs. Daventry was right, they were skeptical. They watched her with the wary politeness of people who'd seen new duchesses come and go, most of them useless. So Clara stopped trying to impress them and started asking questions. How do you handle supply shortages? What's the protocol when a tenant falls behind on rent? Why are we buying grain from this supplier when that one's cheaper? At first they answered carefully, testing her. But Clara didn't just ask. She listened, took notes, implemented suggestions, and slowly, grudgingly, they started to trust her. The steward, Mr. Carlyle, was particularly tough, a gruff man in his 50s who'd served Blackthorne's father and clearly resented taking orders from a woman barely out of girlhood. But when Clara caught an accounting error that would have cost the estate £300, his attitude shifted. You've got a head for this, he admitted one afternoon, reviewing her corrections. Better than most. Most wives, you mean? Most people. He glanced at her. His Grace chose better than I thought. It was the closest thing to a compliment she'd gotten from anyone besides Mrs. Daventry. Clara threw herself into the work with single-minded focus, partly because she needed to prove herself, partly because staying busy kept her from thinking too hard about the wedding looming 2 weeks away. She and Blackthorne still barely knew each other. They had dinner together most nights, brief conversations about estate business and upcoming obligations. He treated her with the same cool professionalism he showed everyone else. No warmth, no intimacy, just efficient partnership. Clara told herself that was fine. She hadn't married him for affection. But sometimes, late at night when the house was silent and sleep wouldn't come, she wondered what would happen after the wedding. They'd have to share more than meals, more than business. The thought made her stomach twist in ways she refused to examine. The summons came on a Tuesday. Clara was in the office, reviewing supply orders with Mrs. Daventry, when a footman appeared at the door. His Grace requests your presence in the study, immediately. The housekeeper's eyebrows rose. Go. Don't keep him waiting. Clara followed the footman through unfamiliar corridors to a part of the house she hadn't explored yet. He stopped at a heavy oak door, knocked twice, then left her there. Enter, Blackthorn's voice called. Clara pushed the door open. The study was masculine and austere. Dark wood, leather chairs, shelves crammed with books and maps. Blackthorn sat behind a massive desk covered in papers. But he wasn't alone. A man stood by the window, tall, sharp-featured, dressed in expensive clothes with an air of casual arrogance that made Clara's skin prickle. Miss Whitmore, Blackthorn said. This is Lord Ashford. He has concerns about our engagement. Ashford turned, his smile not reaching his eyes. Concerns is putting it mildly. Clara's pulse quickened. She recognized that name. Ashford had been at the ball, one of the men circling Blackthorn like a shark. What kind of concerns? The kind that involve propriety, reputation, and whether this hasty marriage is in anyone's best interest. Ashford's gaze raked over her. You're young, inexperienced, and from a family drowning in scandal. Marrying Blackthorn won't change that. It'll just drag his name through the mud. Careful, Blackthorn said quietly, but there was steel beneath the word. Ashford ignored him. I'm trying to save you from a mistake, Dorian. Call off the engagement. Find someone suitable. I have, Blackthorn said. Miss Whitmore is perfectly suitable. She's a liability. Clara's hands clenched. She'd spent weeks proving herself, working until her hands ached and her head spun, and this man waltzed in and dismissed her like she was nothing. With respect, Lord Ashford, Clara said, voice sharp, you don't know the first thing about me. I know your father gambled away his fortune. I know your mother tried to sell you to Pembroke. I know you accepted Blackthorn's proposal because you were desperate. You're right, Clara said flatly. I was desperate, and I made a choice. A smart one. I'm not a liability. I'm an investment. Ashford laughed, a cruel sound. An investment? In what? In this estate. In the people who depend on it. In a partnership that's already producing results. She turned to Blackthorn. Show him the ledgers. Blackthorn's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. He pulled a folder from his desk, tossed it to Ashford. Estate expenditures, Blackthorn said. Compare this month to the last 3. Miss Whitmore's been managing the household for 3 weeks. She's cut waste by 15% while improving staff satisfaction. Ashford flipped through the pages, his smirk fading. She's also identified 2 corrupt suppliers and renegotiated contracts that'll save us £6,000 annually, Blackthorn continued. In 3 weeks. Most duchesses couldn't do that in 3 years. Clara's heart hammered. She hadn't expected him to defend her, hadn't expected him to even notice her work beyond the required minimums. Ashford snapped the folder shut. Impressive. But financial management isn't the same as navigating society. When the vultures start circling, and they will, she'll crack. Then I'll deal with them, Clara said. You think it's that simple? I think it's necessary. Clara stepped closer, meeting Ashford's gaze dead on. You want to protect Blackthorn's reputation? Fine. So do I. Because if he fails, I fail. We're tied together now, so instead of questioning whether I'm good enough, maybe ask yourself whether you're helping or just making noise. Silence fell. Ashford stared at her, something between surprise and grudging respect crossing his face. Then he turned to Blackthorn. You're sure about this? I don't make uncertain decisions, Blackthorn said. Fine. Ashford headed for the door, paused. But when this blows up, don't say I didn't warn you. Then he was gone. Clara exhaled shakily. Her hands were trembling. You handled that well, Blackthorn said. I was terrified. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. He stood, moved around the desk. Ashford won't be the last. There are others. People who'll try to undermine us, spread rumors, turn allies against us. Most of them will be subtler than he was. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to be ready. He studied her face. I meant what I said. You're not a liability. But Ashford's right about one thing. Society will try to break you. If you survive the next few months, you'll survive anything. And if I don't, then we both lose. He said it without emotion, just fact. Clara's chest tightened. No pressure then. His mouth quirked, almost a smile. You agreed to this. I know. Regret it yet? She thought about her old life, the suffocating townhouse, her mother's desperation, the endless parade of men who looked through her like she was glass. No, Clara said, not yet. Good. Blackthorne returned to his desk. The wedding is in 10 days. We'll make the announcement at the spring ball. It'll be, unpleasant. I'll manage. I know you will. He glanced up and for just a second his expression softened. You're stronger than you think, Clara. It was the first time he'd used her first name. The sound of it did something strange to her chest. A flutter, warm and unsettling. She turned quickly before he could see her face. I should get back to work. Clara. She stopped. Thank you, Blackthorne said quietly. For what you said to Ashford. You didn't have to defend me. Yes, I did, Clara said. We're partners. Remember? Then she left before he could respond, her heart pounding hard enough to hurt. The days leading up to the wedding moved like a storm, fast, chaotic, impossible to control. Clara barely slept. Between managing the estate, preparing for the ball, and fending off increasingly hostile letters from society matrons questioning her suitability, she felt like she was drowning. But she kept working, kept pushing, because the alternative was failing, and failure meant going back. She'd die first. The dress arrived 3 days before the wedding, white silk and lace, elegant but not ostentatious. Clara stared at it hanging in her room, wondering if she'd actually wear it or if the whole thing would collapse before then. On the night before the ball, Blackthorne summoned her to his study again. Clara went, exhausted and wary. He was standing by the window staring out at the dark grounds. He didn't turn when she entered. Tomorrow will be brutal, he said. People will stare, whisper. Some will congratulate us. Most will wait for us to fail. I know. If at any point you want to walk away, I won't. He finally turned. You can't know that. Yes, I can. Clara crossed the room, stood beside him. I'm not the same person who accepted your proposal 5 weeks ago. I'm not afraid anymore. You should be. Maybe. She looked up at him. But I'm tired of being afraid. Tired of letting other people decide what I'm worth. She paused. You gave me a chance to prove myself. I'm not wasting it. Blackthorne studied her face for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Clara's breath caught. He opened it. Inside was a ring, simple gold band with a single stone, deep green and glittering. It was my grandmother's, he said. She was difficult, stubborn, refused to play by anyone's rules but her own. My grandfather said she nearly destroyed him, but in the end, she saved him instead. He took Clara's hand, the first time he'd touched her since that night in the ballroom, and slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Tomorrow, Blackthorne said, his voice low, we make this official. No turning back after that. Clara stared at the ring, her throat tight. I know. Are you ready? She thought about everything she'd learned, everything she'd survived, everything she'd become in 5 short weeks. Yes, Clara said. I'm ready. Blackthorne's hand tightened around hers, and for the first time since this whole insane thing started, Clara thought maybe, just maybe, they'd actually pull this off. The ballroom at Thornfield Manor glittered like a trap made of champagne and candlelight. Clara stood at the entrance beside Blackthorne, her hand tucked into the crook of his arm, feeling the weight of 300 pairs of eyes settling on her like stones. The orchestra played something bright and hollow. Conversation died in ripples as they descended the stairs. Breathe, Blackthorne murmured, barely moving his lips. Clara forced air into her lungs. The ring on her finger felt heavy, final. They reached the bottom of the stairs and the crowd parted, not welcoming, just making space, the way people step back from something dangerous. Lord Ashford stood near the refreshment table, watching with the cold assessment of a man waiting for disaster. Lady Pemberton whispered behind her fan to a cluster of matrons, their eyes sharp as knives. Duke Blackthorne, their host, Lord Thornfield, a pompous man with too much money and too little sense, appeared with a forced smile. "And Miss Whitmore, how unexpected to see you both." "Unexpected," Blackthorn repeated, voice flat. "Interesting word choice." Thornfield's smile flickered. "I only meant the engagement was so sudden. People are naturally curious." "Let them be curious," Clara said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "We're here to celebrate, not explain ourselves." A few heads turned. Someone laughed, nervous and quickly stifled. Thornfield blinked, clearly unused to being spoken to so directly by someone he considered beneath him. "Of course." "Well, enjoy the evening." He fled. Blackthorn's grip on her arm tightened fractionally. Approval or warning, Clara couldn't tell. They moved through the crowd like sharks through shallow water. People nodded, smiled with their mouths but not their eyes, offered congratulations that sounded like condolences. Clara played her part, gracious, composed, every inch the Duchess she was about to become. But beneath the surface, her nerves screamed. "Clara Whitmore, my." The voice came from behind, female, smooth as poisoned honey. Clara turned. Lady Genevieve Harcourt stood there in emerald silk, beautiful in the sharp-edged way of women who'd weaponized their looks young and never looked back. She'd been engaged to some earl's son, Clara remembered, before the man died in a hunting accident and left her wealthy, titled, and dangerously bored. "Lady Harcourt," Clara said carefully. "I heard the most fascinating rumor," Genevieve said, moving closer, "that you and the Duke met exactly once before he proposed. At the Ashford ball, wasn't it? How wonderfully spontaneous." The word dripped with mockery. "Spontaneity has its advantages," Clara said. "Does it? I always thought marriage required at least a passing acquaintance with one's future spouse. But perhaps I'm old-fashioned." Genevieve's smile sharpened. "Tell me, do you even know his favorite color? His politics? Whether he takes sugar in his tea?" Clara's jaw tightened. Around them, conversations had stopped. People were listening now, eager for blood. "I know he's brilliant," Clara said quietly. "I know he rebuilt an empire from ashes. I know he values competence over pedigree and results over reputation. That's more than most marriages can claim." "How pragmatic," Genevieve said. "And here I thought love might factor in somewhere." "Love is a luxury," Clara said, meeting her gaze dead on. "I prefer security." Spoken like a true fortune hunter. The words cracked through the air like a whip. The crowd inhaled collectively. Clara felt Blackthorn tense beside her, sensed him preparing to intervene. But she didn't need rescuing. "Spoken like someone who learned to be practical," Clara corrected, her voice cutting. "My family lost everything to bad decisions and worse luck. I could have married Lord Pembroke and lived in comfortable misery, or I could have married a man who respects intelligence over breeding. I chose respect. If that makes me a fortune hunter, then every woman in this room is guilty of the same crime." Silence. Genevieve's face flushed. Several women in the crowd looked away, suddenly fascinated by their champagne. "Careful, Miss Whitmore," Genevieve said, voice low and vicious. "You're making enemies." "I'm making a point," Clara said. "There's a difference." Genevieve's eyes narrowed. Then she smiled, cold and calculated. "We'll see how long that confidence lasts. Society has a way of humbling those who think they're above it." She swept away, leaving a wake of whispers. Clara's hands were shaking. She pressed them together, willing them still. "That was either brilliant or suicidal," Blackthorn said quietly. "Probably both." "She'll retaliate." "I know." He turned her to face him, his expression unreadable. "You didn't have to defend yourself so publicly. It draws attention." "I'm marrying you," Clara said. "I already have attention. Might as well use it." Something that might have been pride flickered in his eyes. "Dance with me." It wasn't a request. Clara let him lead her onto the floor as the orchestra swung into a waltz. His hand settled at her waist, hers on his shoulder, and they began to move in time with the music. "You're better at this than I expected," she said. "I'm good at everything I need to be," Blackthorn said, "including pretending I enjoy these circuses." "Do you enjoy it?" "No, but it's necessary." He guided her through a turn. "People need to see us together, united. If they sense division, they'll exploit it, like Genevieve. She's the least of our problems." Clara's stomach dropped. What do you mean? I received word this afternoon, Blackthorne said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Lord Crestwood is planning something. He's been meeting with investors, spreading rumors about instability in my holdings. He wants to undermine my financial position. Can he? If he convinces enough people, yes. His jaw tightened. Crestwood's been trying to destroy me for years. This marriage gives him ammunition. He'll claim I'm distracted, making irrational decisions. And are you? Blackthorne's gaze sharpened. What? Making irrational decisions. Marrying me. He was quiet for several beats, their feet moving in practiced rhythm. Ask me again in 6 months. It wasn't reassurance, but it was honest. The waltz ended. Blackthorne released her, gave a perfunctory bow, then was immediately pulled away by Lord Thornfield and a gaggle of men eager to discuss business. Clara stood alone in the middle of the dance floor, feeling suddenly exposed. Miss Whitmore. She turned. A young man stood there, pleasant-looking, brown hair, friendly smile. He looked vaguely familiar. James Marlowe, he said, offering his hand. We met briefly at the Ashford Ball, before your dramatic announcement. Clara shook his hand cautiously. I remember. I wanted to offer my congratulations, and my apologies. For what? For how people are treating you. His expression turned serious. It's not fair. You're being judged for making a smart choice in impossible circumstances. If you were a man, they'd call it strategic. Because you're a woman, they call it mercenary. The unexpected kindness made Clara's throat tight. Thank you. For what it's worth, Marlowe said, I think Blackthorne's lucky. Most women would crumble under this scrutiny. You're still standing. Barely. He laughed. Still counts. They talked for a few minutes, light conversation about nothing important, a welcome reprieve from the hostility. Marlowe was easy to talk to, uncomplicated in a way that felt almost foreign after weeks with Blackthorne. But when Clara glanced across the room, she caught Genevieve watching them, her expression calculating. A chill ran down Clara's spine. I should go, she said abruptly. Marlowe looked confused. Did I say something wrong? No, I need air. She fled before he could respond, weaving through the crowd toward the terrace doors. The night air hit her face like a slap, cold and sharp. Clara gripped the stone railing, her breath coming too fast. Get it together. You can't fall apart here. Running away again? Clara spun. Genevieve stood in the doorway, backlit by the ballroom's glow. I needed air, Clara said, or you needed to escape. Genevieve stepped onto the terrace, the door closing behind her with an ominous click. Tell me, Miss Whitmore, do you really think you can survive this world? Or are you just pretending until the whole thing collapses? I'm surviving fine. Are you? Genevieve moved closer. Because from where I stand, you look terrified. One bad scandal and Blackthorne will cast you aside like yesterday's news. Men like him don't tolerate weakness. And women like you don't tolerate competition, Clara shot back. Genevieve's smile turned vicious. Competition? Oh, darling, you're not competition. You're a curiosity, a nobody who got lucky and mistook it for skill. She leaned in, voice dropping to a whisper. But luck runs out. And when it does, I'll be there to watch you fall. Why do you care? Clara demanded. What did I ever do to you? You took something that should have been mine. Clara blinked. What? Blackthorne. Genevieve's mask cracked, showing raw fury beneath. We had an understanding. Before his father died, before everything went to hell, he was supposed to marry me. Then tragedy struck, and suddenly he was too busy rebuilding to bother with social obligations. I waited. 5 years I waited. And then you, some desperate little nobody, waltz in and steal what I spent half my life positioning for. The pieces clicked into place. The hostility, the venom. This wasn't about Clara at all. He never mentioned you, Clara said. Of course he didn't. I'm yesterday's mistake. You're today's convenience. Genevieve's voice turned ugly. But mark my words, this marriage won't last. He'll tire of you. And when he does, I'll be waiting. You're delusional, Clara said flatly. Genevieve's hand shot out, grabbed Clara's wrist hard enough to bruise. I'm patient. There's a difference. Let go of me. Or what? You'll tell your husband? He doesn't care about you, Clara. You're a tool, a pretty prop to make him look stable. The moment you stop being useful, the moment you stop making threats, Blackthorn's voice cut through the night like ice, would be advisable. Both women froze. Blackthorn stood in the doorway, his expression carved from stone. Clara had never seen him look so dangerous. Genevieve released Clara's wrist immediately, stepping back. "Dorian, I was just—" "Leaving," he said, "permanently. You're no longer welcome at Blackthorn Estate or any event I host. If I hear you've been spreading lies about my wife, I'll destroy every social connection you have. Am I clear?" Genevieve's face went white. "You can't." "I can. I will." He moved forward, and Genevieve actually flinched. "You had your chance years ago. You chose status over substance. Live with that choice quietly, or I'll make sure you live with it very publicly." For a moment, Genevieve looked like she might argue. Then her shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of her. She turned and walked back into the ballroom without another word. Clara exhaled shakily. Her wrist throbbed where Genevieve had grabbed it. "Are you hurt?" Blackthorn's voice had shifted, still hard, but edged with something that might have been concern. "I'm fine." "Show me." Clara held out her wrist. Even in the dim light, the red marks were visible. Blackthorn's jaw tightened. "That's assault." "It's nothing. It's not nothing." He looked up, his eyes burning. "She threatened you." "She's angry and desperate. People say stupid things when they're desperate." "That's not an excuse." "I'm not excusing her. I'm just—" Clara pulled her hand back. "I can handle people like Genevieve. I don't need you fighting my battles." "We're partners," Blackthorn said quietly. "Your battles are my battles." The words hit harder than they should have. Clara looked away, her throat tight. "What she said," Clara began, then stopped. "About you and her. Was that true?" Blackthorn hesitated. "There was a time, years ago, before my father died, when an arrangement seemed likely, expected, but nothing was ever formalized. Did you want it?" "I was 19 and stupid enough to think marriage was about compatibility instead of survival." He leaned against the railing. "Then my father died, and I learned exactly how brutal this world is. Genevieve wasn't interested in helping rebuild. She wanted the title, the status, the easy life. So I cut ties. And she's hated you ever since. She's hated that I chose myself over her comfort." He looked at Clara. "You asked earlier if marrying you was irrational. The answer is no. You're the most rational choice I've made in years. You understand what this is, what it requires. Genevieve never did." Clara's chest tightened. It should have felt like a compliment. Instead, it just felt clinical. "We should go back inside," she said. Blackthorn caught her arm gently. "Clara, don't." She pulled away. "Don't pretend this is more than a transaction. You've been honest from the start. I appreciate that. But let's not confuse strategy with sentiment." His expression shuddered. "As you wish." They returned to the ballroom separately. Clara plastered on a smile and endured another hour of veiled hostility and false congratulations before Blackthorn finally signaled they could leave. The carriage ride back to the estate was silent. Clara stared out the window, exhausted and raw. When they arrived, Blackthorn walked her to her rooms. Propriety demanded separate quarters until the wedding, and paused at her door. "Tomorrow's the ceremony," he said. "Small, private, just us and witnesses." "I know. After that, everything changes. We'll be bound legally, financially, socially, no escape clauses." "I know that too." He studied her face. "Are you having second thoughts?" Clara thought about Genevieve's threats, the hostile crowd, the endless scrutiny, thought about her mother's warning about losing herself. "No," she said. "I'm just tired." "Get some rest. We have a long fight ahead." He turned to leave. "Dorian." He stopped, looked back. "Thank you," Clara said quietly, "for defending me tonight. You didn't have to." "Yes, I did." His voice softened fractionally. "You're mine to defend now. That's not negotiable." Then he was gone, leaving Clara alone with a racing heart and thoughts she couldn't quite untangle. She slept badly that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Genevieve's fury, heard the whispers, felt the weight of tomorrow pressing down like a physical thing. But when dawn broke, Clara was ready. She dressed in the white silk gown, let the maids arrange her hair, slid Blackthorn's grandmother's ring onto her finger beside the emerald engagement band. The ceremony was held in the estate's small chapel, just Blackthorn, Clara, the priest, and Mrs. Daventry and Mr. Carlyle as witnesses. No flowers, no music, just words spoken quickly and signed paperwork that felt more like a business merger than a marriage. I now pronounce you husband and wife. And just like that, Clara Whitmore ceased to exist. She was Duchess Clara Blackthorn now. The thought should have felt triumphant. Instead, it felt terrifying. They signed the register in silence. Blackthorn's hand was steady. Clara's shook slightly, but she got her name, her new name, written without smearing the ink. "Congratulations," the priest said, looking uncertain whether that was appropriate. "Thank you," Blackthorn said. They walked back to the main house together, still not touching, still strangers bound by law and necessity. "There's a contract signing this afternoon," Blackthorn said as they reached the entrance hall. "Financial documents that need both our signatures now that the marriage is legal. Mr. Carlyle will walk you through it." "Fine," he paused. "Tonight, we'll need to—" "I know what we need to do tonight," Clara cut him off, her face heating. Blackthorn's expression was unreadable. "I'll make it quick, painless as possible." The clinical description made her stomach turn. How romantic. This was never about romance. "I know." Clara forced herself to meet his eyes. "I'll be ready." He nodded once, then walked away, already pulling documents from his coat pocket, already back to business. Clara stood alone in her wedding dress in the entrance hall of a house that was now legally hers, feeling nothing like a bride and everything like a soldier preparing for battle. The afternoon passed in a blur of signatures and legal language. Clara barely processed half of it, just signed where Mr. Carlyle indicated and tried not to think about the night ahead. Dinner was formal, awkward. They ate in silence, the weight of what came next hanging between them like fog. When the meal ended, Blackthorn stood. "I'll come to your rooms in an hour." Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. She returned to her chambers, dismissed the maids, and sat on the edge of the enormous bed in her nightdress, hands clenched in her lap. She'd known this was coming, had prepared for it as best she could, but knowing something intellectually and facing it were different things entirely. The knock came exactly 1 hour later. "Come in," Clara said. Blackthorn entered, still fully dressed. He looked at her sitting there and something complicated crossed his face. "We don't have to do this tonight," he said. "If you're not ready." "The marriage isn't legal until it's consummated," Clara said, repeating the cold fact she'd learned from Mrs. Daventry. "And if someone challenges the validity, no one will. You don't know that." Clara stood, forcing strength into her voice. "We made a deal. I keep my end of bargains." Blackthorn moved closer. "This isn't a transaction, Clara." "Yes, it is." She lifted her chin. "That's what we are. What we agreed to be. So let's just get it over with." The words came out harsher than intended. Blackthorn's jaw tightened. "Get it over with," he repeated flatly. "I didn't mean—" Clara stopped. "I just want to be able to sleep tonight without worrying about whether some lawyer will find a loophole to destroy everything." He studied her for a long moment. Then, with deliberate slowness, he reached up and began unbuttoning his shirt. Clara's breath caught. "I'll make this as quick as possible," he said quietly. "But I need you to understand something. You're my wife now. Not my property, not a tool. My wife. That means something to me, even if it doesn't to you." "It means something to me," Clara whispered. "Does it?" She didn't know how to answer that. Blackthorn finished with his shirt, let it fall. Clara tried not to stare at the scars crossing his chest, evidence of a violent past he'd never discussed. He moved closer, his hand coming up to cup her face with surprising gentleness. "If you tell me to stop," he said, "I will. This doesn't happen unless you want it to." "I want it to," Clara said, and realized it was true. Not because she desired him, not exactly, but because completing this final step meant security. Safety. No more uncertainty. His thumb brushed across her cheek. "Then I'll try not to hurt you." What followed was neither painful nor pleasurable, just necessary. Blackthorn was efficient, careful, and when it was over, he didn't linger. Just pulled away, started getting dressed. "You should rest," he said, not looking at her. Clara pulled the blanket around herself, feeling strangely hollow. Will you stay? He paused, shirt half buttoned. Do you want me to? She didn't know, but the thought of being alone right now felt worse than the awkwardness. Yes, she said. Blackthorn finished dressing, then, to her surprise, sat on the edge of the bed, his back to her. They stayed like that for a long time, not speaking, just existing in the same space. Finally, Blackthorn stood. I have work to do, but if you need anything, I'll be fine. He looked at her once more, something unreadable in his eyes. Then he left. Clara lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of irrevocable choices settling into her bones. She was married, legally bound. There was no going back now. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, she just felt numb. Sleep came eventually, restless and full of shadows. She woke to pounding on her door. Clara sat up, disoriented. Pale dawn light filtered through the curtains. The pounding continued, urgent. Your Grace, wake up! Clara stumbled to the door, yanked it open. Mrs. Daventry stood there, still in her nightclothes, face pale. What's wrong? It's His Grace, the housekeeper said, voice shaking. There's been an accident. You need to come now. Clara's blood turned to ice. What kind of accident? Fire. In the East Wing. He went in to save the staff and... Mrs. Daventry's voice broke. He's trapped inside? The world tilted. Clara ran. She tore through the corridors in her nightdress, barefoot, heart hammering. Smoke filled the air, thick and choking. Servants rushed past carrying water, shouting instructions. The East Wing was an inferno. Flames climbed the walls, eating through centuries-old wood like it was paper. Heat rolled out in waves that stole the breath from Clara's lungs. Where is he? She screamed at the nearest footman. Second floor. Tried to get the maids out. Stairs collapsed. Clara didn't wait for more. She grabbed a wet cloth from someone's hands, pressed it to her face, and ran into the burning building. Your Grace, no! She ignored them. Smoke blinded her. Heat seared her skin. She could barely see, barely breathe. Dorian! She screamed. Dorian! No answer. Clara stumbled forward, coughing, eyes streaming. The floor groaned beneath her feet. Part of the ceiling crashed down behind her, cutting off her escape. Panic clawed at her throat. Then she heard it. A sound. Movement. She pushed through a doorway, and there he was. Blackthorn lay pinned beneath a fallen beam, unconscious, blood streaking his face. Two maids huddled in the corner, too terrified to move. Help me! Clara shouted at them. Together, they managed to lift the beam enough for Clara to drag Blackthorn out from under it. He was heavy, dead weight. Clara's muscles screamed. Go! She told the maids. Find another way out! They fled. Clara tried to lift Blackthorn, couldn't. He was too big and she was too small. Another section of ceiling collapsed. The doorway she'd come through disappeared in flames. They were trapped. Clara looked at Blackthorn's unconscious face, at the ring on her finger, at the fire closing in from all sides. This couldn't be how it ended. Not now, not after everything. She grabbed his shoulders, pulled with every ounce of strength she had. Wake up, she hissed. Wake up, you stubborn bastard. I didn't marry you just to watch you die. His eyes flickered open, unfocused, confused. Clara! We have to move, now! He tried to stand, stumbled. Clara caught him, shouldered his weight. Together, they staggered through the smoke, searching for an exit. The fire roared around them, hungry and relentless. Clara's lungs burned, her vision blurred. Then, there, a window. She dragged Blackthorn toward it, kicked the glass out with her bare foot. Pain exploded through her heel, but she didn't stop. Jump, she gasped. They fell together through the window into the cold dawn air, hit the ground hard enough to knock the breath from Clara's lungs. But they were out. People rushed forward, servants, staff, pulling them away from the burning building. Clara collapsed onto the grass, coughing violently. Beside her, Blackthorn wasn't moving. No, she whispered. No, no, no. Someone, Mr. Carlyle, dropped to his knees beside Blackthorn, checking for a pulse. He's breathing, but we need a doctor. Now! Clara's vision darkened at the edges. She'd pushed too far, breathed in too much smoke. The last thing she saw before unconsciousness took her was the East Wing collapsing in on itself, taking with it whatever evidence might have revealed whether this was an accident. or murder. Clara woke to pain. Her lungs felt like they'd been scraped raw with steel wool. Every breath burned. Her foot throbbed where glass had torn through skin. The smell of smoke clung to her hair, her skin, everything. She forced her eyes open. Unfamiliar ceiling, soft bed, sunlight streaming through windows she didn't recognize. "You're awake." Clara turned her head too fast, winced. Mrs. Daventry sat in a chair by the bed, looking like she hadn't slept in days. "How long?" Clara's voice came out as a rasp. 2 days. The doctor said you'd breathed in enough smoke to kill a smaller woman." The housekeeper's face was drawn. "You shouldn't have gone in there. Dorian, alive, unconscious for the first 30 hours, but alive." Mrs. Daventry stood, poured water from a pitcher. "He's been asking for you every time he wakes up." Clara tried to sit up, gasped as pain lanced through her ribs. "Careful. You've got bruises from the fall, cuts on your feet, and the doctor said—" "I don't care what the doctor said." Clara pushed herself upright through sheer stubbornness. "I need to see him. You need to rest. I need to see my husband." The word felt strange on her tongue, but it was true now in ways it hadn't been before the fire. She'd run into burning building for him, had dragged him out when any sane person would have saved themselves. That changed things. Mrs. Daventry sighed. "He's in the south wing, 3 doors down. But if you collapse, I'm not explaining it to him." Clara swung her legs out of bed, hissed as her torn foot touched the floor. Someone had bandaged it, but blood was already seeping through. She didn't care. She limped down the corridor, one hand on the wall for balance. Every step hurt. She kept walking. The door to Blackthorn's room was slightly ajar. Clara pushed it open. He lay in bed, shirtless, bandages wrapped around his ribs and left shoulder. His face was bruised, one eye swollen nearly shut, but he was breathing, steady and strong. "Clara." His voice was rough, damaged by smoke, but the relief in it was unmistakable. She crossed to the bed, sank into the chair beside it. "You're an idiot." "Probably." A ghost of a smile. "So are you. Running into a burning building." "I learned from the best." They looked at each other. Clara felt something shift in her chest, a wall crumbling that she hadn't realized she'd built. "The maids?" she asked. "Safe. Thanks to you." His good eye focused on her. "Mr. Carlyle said you carried me out." "Dragged. There's a difference." "You could have died." "So could you." Clara's hands clenched in her lap. "What were you thinking, going in there alone?" "I was thinking I couldn't stand by and watch people burn." He tried to sit up, grimaced. The fire started in the storage room. Old wood, dry as bone, spread faster than anyone expected. "Was it an accident?" Blackthorn's expression hardened. "No." Clara's stomach dropped. "You're sure?" The investigator found accelerant, lamp oil poured in 3 separate locations. "Someone set that fire deliberately." His voice went cold. "Someone tried to kill us." The words hung in the air like poison. "Crestwood," Clara said. "Possibly, or one of a dozen other enemies." Blackthorn's jaw tightened. "But whoever it was just made a critical mistake. They underestimated you." "What do you mean?" "You saved my life, Clara, in front of witnesses. The entire household saw you run into that fire." He reached for her hand, winced at the movement. "They're calling you a hero. Even the staff who doubted you. They're talking about how the new Duchess risked everything to save the Duke and his people." Clara hadn't thought about that. Had only thought about getting Dorian out alive. "I didn't do it for reputation," she said quietly. "I know." His fingers tightened around hers. "That's why it matters." A knock at the door interrupted them. Mr. Carlyle entered, looking grim. "Your Grace, forgiveness for the intrusion, but there's news." "What kind?" Blackthorn asked. "Lord Crestwood is spreading rumors. Claims the fire was caused by negligence. Says you've been so distracted by your hasty marriage that estate management has suffered. He's calling for an investigation." Clara felt fury ignite in her chest. "He sets a fire and then blames us for it?" "We can't prove he set it," Carlyle said carefully. "The evidence points to arson, but not to a specific person." "Then we prove something else," Clara said. Both men looked at her. "What do you mean?" Blackthorn asked. Clara's mind raced. Crestwood wanted to paint them as incompetent, distracted, vulnerable. The fire was supposed to destabilize them, maybe kill Blackthorn, leave the estate in chaos. But it hadn't worked. They'd survived. And now they had an opportunity. "We turn this around," Clara said. "Use the fire as proof of exactly the opposite of what Crestwood's claiming." "I'm listening," Blackthorn said. "The fire happened because someone is desperate to destroy us. That means we're a threat." Clara leaned forward, ignoring the pain in her ribs. "So we prove we're not just a threat. We're unstoppable. We rebuild faster and better than anyone expects. We show the world that Blackthorn Estate doesn't just survive attacks, it thrives despite them." Carlyle frowned. "Rebuilding the East Wing will take months, cost thousands." "Then we do it in weeks," Clara said. "Hire double the workers, source materials locally to show we support the community. Turn this into a demonstration of strength, not weakness." "That's expensive," Carlyle warned. "It's an investment," Clara countered. "Crestwood is betting we'll be paralyzed by this. If we move fast, decisively, publicly, we make him look desperate and foolish." Blackthorn was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "You've been thinking about this." "I've been lying in bed for 2 days with nothing else to do." Clara met his gaze. "We need to hit back. Not with violence or legal battles that'll drag on forever. With competence, with results. Show everyone that we're exactly as formidable as they feared." Silence. Then Blackthorn smiled, a real smile, not the careful half gesture he usually deployed. "Do it." "Your Grace, the cost," Carlyle started, "is justified," Blackthorn cut him off. "Clara's right. This is about perception as much as reality. We announce the reconstruction today. Hire begins tomorrow. I want the East Wing functional within a month." "That's impossible," Carlyle said. "Then we'll do the impossible." Blackthorn looked at Clara. "You'll oversee the project, work with Carlyle and Mrs. Daventry. Whatever you need, you have it." Clara's pulse quickened. This was real authority, real trust, real risk. "I won't let you down," she said. "I know." Carlyle still looked doubtful, but he nodded. "I'll start drawing up contractor lists." After he left, Clara turned back to Blackthorn. "You should rest." "So should you. You look half dead." "Charming." "I'm serious, Clara." His voice softened. "You saved my life. That debt—" "There's no debt," she interrupted. "We're married, partners, remember?" "Partners," he repeated. "Is that still what we are?" Clara thought about running into the fire, about the terror she'd felt seeing him trapped, about the hollow ache when she'd thought he might die. "I don't know what we are anymore," she admitted, "but we're not just a transaction, not after this." Blackthorn's expression shifted, something raw and unguarded crossing his face. "No, not just a transaction." The moment stretched between them, fragile and strange. Then Clara stood. "I should let you sleep." "Clara." She paused at the door. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for not leaving me in there." "I told you," Clara said. "I keep my end of bargains." But they both knew it had been more than that. The reconstruction began the next morning. Clara threw herself into it with single-minded focus. She met with contractors, negotiated prices, reviewed plans, and coordinated logistics with a precision that surprised even her. Her foot still hurt, her lungs still burned with every deep breath, but she ignored it. There was too much work to do. Mrs. Daventry proved invaluable. The woman knew every tradesman within 50 miles and wasn't afraid to strong-arm them into working faster for less money. Mr. Carlyle handled the finances, tracking every penny with accountant's precision, and Clara held it all together. She was everywhere, checking on workers, solving problems, making decisions. The staff watched her with newfound respect. This wasn't the uncertain girl who'd arrived 6 weeks ago. This was a woman who'd run into fire and come out steel. Word spread quickly. Within 3 days, the story had reached London. The new Duchess of Blackthorn, barely married, had saved her husband from a deadly blaze and was now personally overseeing the estate's reconstruction. The narrative Crestwood had tried to create, incompetent, distracted, weak, evaporated. Instead, people talked about the Duchess who'd risked everything, who'd proven loyalty wasn't just words. Clara intercepted the first hostile letter on day 5. It was addressed to Blackthorn, sealed with Crestwood's crest. She opened it anyway. Blackthorn, your recent misfortune is regrettable. I trust you'll take appropriate measures to ensure such negligence doesn't recur. The investors I represent are concerned about stability. Perhaps it's time to consider new leadership. Crestwood. Clara read it twice, fury building with each word. Then she did something reckless. She wrote back, Lord Crestwood, your concern is noted and dismissed. The fire at Blackthorn Estate was arson, not negligence. Investigators are pursuing all leads. I trust you'll cooperate fully with their inquiries. As for stability, the East Wing will be fully restored in 3 weeks. We've hired 60 local workers, sourced materials from regional suppliers, and implemented safety protocols that exceed industry standards. This estate is stronger now than before the fire. If your investors have concerns, they're welcome to visit and see the work firsthand. I suspect they'll be reassured. Regards, Duchess Clara Blackthorn. She sealed it before she could second-guess herself and sent it with the Morning Post. Blackthorn found out that evening. You wrote to Crestwood? He didn't sound angry, just surprised. He wrote first. I responded. You accused him of arson. I implied investigators would be thorough. There's a difference. Blackthorn leaned against the doorframe of the temporary office Clara had claimed. He was recovering quickly, still bruised, still moving carefully, but stronger each day. You're either brilliant or insane. Why not both? He laughed, a real sound that made something warm bloom in Clara's chest. Fair point. Are you angry? No. He moved into the room, picked up the copy of her letter she'd kept. You called his bluff perfectly. Crestwood wanted to make us look weak. You turned it into a challenge. Now if he backs down, he looks scared. If he escalates, he looks desperate. And if he actually comes to inspect the reconstruction, then we show him exactly how formidable we are. Blackthorn set down the letter. You're learning fast. I had a good teacher. I haven't taught you anything. You've taught me everything, Clara corrected. How to see threats, how to respond strategically, how to turn weakness into strength. She paused. How to survive. Blackthorn was quiet for a moment. Then, you're not the same person who accepted my proposal. No, I'm not. Do you regret it? Any of this? Clara considered the question honestly. The past weeks had been brutal, exhausting, terrifying, painful. She'd been attacked socially, physically, nearly killed. But she'd also discovered strengths she hadn't known she possessed. Had built something real. Had become someone she actually respected. No, she said. I don't regret it. Even knowing what's still coming? Especially knowing that. Clara met his gaze. Because now I know I can handle it. Something shifted in Blackthorn's expression. Pride, maybe, or recognition. We make a good team. We do. He moved closer, and Clara's breath caught. They were alone. Close enough to touch. The air felt charged, dangerous. Clara! A knock interrupted them. Mrs. Daventry appeared, looking apologetic. Forgiveness, Your Grace, but there are visitors. Lord Ashford and Lady Vivian Hale. They're asking to speak with you both. Clara and Blackthorn exchanged glances. Show them in, Blackthorn said. Ashford entered first, Vivian behind him. Both looked serious. We heard about the fire, Ashford said without preamble, and about Crestwood's letter. News travels fast, Blackthorn said neutrally. News about attempted murder travels very fast. Ashford's expression was grim. Crestwood's overplayed his hand. Several of us have been talking. We want to make our position clear. Which is? Clara asked. Vivian stepped forward. We stand with Blackthorn, and with you, Your Grace. Clara blinked, startled. Vivian had been one of the few people at the ball who hadn't looked at her with open contempt. Why? Clara asked. Because Crestwood's a snake who's been poisoning society for years, Vivian said bluntly. Someone needed to stand up to him. You did. She looked at Clara directly. You ran into a burning building to save your husband and his staff. That's not the action of a fortune hunter or social climber. That's courage. Real courage. We've been organizing, Ashford added. A coalition of families willing to publicly support Blackthorn Estate. It won't stop Crestwood, but it'll make his attacks less effective. Blackthorn's expression remained carefully neutral. Why now? Because you're finally worth supporting, Ashford said. For years, you've kept everyone at arm's length, refused alliances, rejected friendships, built walls. But this, he gestured between Clara and Blackthorn, changes things. You're not alone anymore. That makes you stronger. And strength attracts allies. Clara felt the weight of their words settling over her. This was what she'd hoped for. Recognition, respect, proof that her gamble had paid off. But it felt strange, uncomfortable even. What do you want in return? Clara asked, because there was always a price. Vivian smiled. Smart question. We want access. When Blackthorn makes moves in Parliament, we want to know. When opportunities arise, we want consideration. Nothing unreasonable, just partnership. Partnership, Blackthorn repeated. Like what Clara and I have? Exactly like that, Ashford said. Mutual benefit, shared risk. That's how real power works. Blackthorn looked at Clara. She gave a tiny nod. Fine, Blackthorn said. But understand, if you betray this alliance, I'll destroy you faster than I would an enemy. Betrayal from friends is worse than attacks from rivals. Agreed, Ashford said. They shook hands, a formal gesture that felt like stepping into new territory. After they left, Clara sank into a chair. Did that actually just happen? We have allies now, Blackthorn said, sounding almost bemused. I didn't think that was possible. Why not? Because I've spent 8 years making enemies, not friends. I thought power came from independence, from not needing anyone. He looked at her. You've changed that calculation. By almost dying? By showing that vulnerability isn't always weakness, that asking for help or accepting it doesn't make you less formidable. He sat across from her. I've been thinking about what you said, about partnership. I don't think I really understood what that meant until now. Clara's throat tightened. And what does it mean? It means we don't just work together. We trust each other, defend each other, build something bigger than either of us could create alone. He paused. It means I was wrong to treat this as purely transactional. You're not a tool, Clara. He stopped, seeming to struggle for words. I'm what? Clara whispered. You're the best decision I've ever made. The words hit like lightning. Clara stared at him, heart hammering. Before she could respond, another knock. Mr. Carlyle this time, holding a newspaper. Your Graces, you'll want to see this. He handed the paper to Blackthorn. Clara leaned over to read the headline. Duchess of Blackthorn, Society's Unlikely Hero. The article detailed the fire, Clara's rescue, the reconstruction efforts. But it went further, praising her intelligence, her courage, her management skills, calling her a new model for aristocratic wives, suggesting that perhaps competence mattered more than breeding. It was everything Clara had never dared to hope for. There's more, Carlyle said. He looked almost pleased. 3 families have withdrawn their support from Crestwood's investment group. They're citing concerns about his judgment and stability. He's losing allies, Clara said slowly. Because of you, Blackthorn said. Because you proved him wrong about everything. For the first time since accepting Blackthorn's proposal, Clara felt something close to triumph. They'd survived an assassination attempt, had turned a disaster into opportunity, had gained allies and weakened their enemy. They were winning. The reconstruction finished in 23 days. Clara stood in the rebuilt East Wing, sunlight streaming through new windows, and felt pride settle into her bones. The workers had done beautiful work, stronger than before, safer, more efficient. And she'd made it happen. The staff gathered for the unofficial unveiling. Mrs. Daventry stood beside her, beaming. Mr. Carlyle looked grudgingly impressed. The maids Clara had saved from the fire watched her with open gratitude. Blackthorn arrived last, still moving carefully but almost fully healed. He walked through the wing slowly, inspecting every detail. Finally, he turned to Clara. It's perfect. It's functional, Clara corrected. Perfect is wasteful. He smiled. You sound like me. I learned from the best. The gathered staff applauded. Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. To the Duchess, Mrs. Daventry said, raising an imaginary glass. To the Duchess, the others echoed. Clara looked at their faces. Respect, admiration, loyalty. Things she'd never thought she'd earn. Blackthorn took her hand, squeezed gently. You did this. We did this, Clara corrected. No. His voice was firm. I gave you authority. You made it real. This is your victory, Clara. Own it." So she did. That night, Clara sat in her rooms, their rooms now, since propriety no longer demanded separation, and wrote a letter. "Mother, I'm writing to tell you I'm well. The fire you may have heard about was serious, but we survived. The estate is stronger now. I know you worried I'd lose myself in this marriage, that I'd disappear into someone else's story. But I haven't. If anything, I've found myself. Discovered strengths I didn't know existed. I'm not the daughter you raised. I'm someone better. Someone who doesn't apologize for taking up space, who doesn't wait for permission to act. I hope someday you'll be proud of that. Your daughter, Clara." She sealed it before she could second-guess herself. Blackthorn found her at the window, staring out at the grounds. The rebuilt east wing stood strong against the darkening sky. "Can't sleep?" he asked. Too much to think about. He joined her at the window. They stood in comfortable silence for a while. "Crestwood will retaliate," Blackthorn said finally. "This isn't over." "I know. Are you ready for that?" Clara thought about everything she'd survived, the fire, the attacks, the reconstruction. Thought about who she'd become. "Yes," she said. "I'm ready." Blackthorn turned to face her fully. "When this started, I told you this was a transaction, a strategic alliance." "I remember. I was lying to myself." His voice dropped. "It stopped being strategy the moment you ran into that fire. Maybe before that. Maybe the first time you challenged me instead of just agreeing." Clara's breath caught. "Dorian, I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly. "I know what we agreed to, but I wanted you to know you're not a transaction to me anymore. You haven't been for a while." The words settled between them, heavy with implication. Clara looked at this man she'd married out of desperation. This stranger who'd become a partner, then something more complicated. "You're not a transaction to me either," she said quietly. His hand came up, cupped her face with the same gentleness he'd shown on their wedding night. But there was something different now, a question in his eyes. Clara answered by leaning into his touch. When he kissed her, it wasn't strategic or necessary. It was real. And for the first time since accepting his proposal, Clara felt something that had nothing to do with survival or security. She felt wanted. The kiss deepened. Blackthorn's hands slid into her hair, and Clara pressed closer, feeling the solid strength of him, the heat. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Blackthorn rested his forehead against hers. "We should probably figure out what we are now," he said. "Eventually," Clara agreed, but not tonight." "No? Tonight we just—" She hesitated, searching for words. "Exist, without strategy or planning. Just us." "I'm not sure I know how to do that." Clara smiled. "Then we'll learn together." And they did. The next morning, Clara woke wrapped in Blackthorn's arms, feeling safer than she had in years. Outside, the rebuilt East Wing stood as testament to their strength. In London, Crestwood plotted his next move. And Clara Blackthorn, formerly nobody, now Duchess, faced the future with something she'd never had before. Power. Not given. Not inherited. Earned. Crestwood's counterattack came 3 weeks later dressed as an invitation. Clara held the cream-colored card, reading the elegant script with growing unease. "Lord and Lady Crestwood request the pleasure of your company at the season's grand masquerade, a celebration of tradition, legacy, and the enduring strength of England's finest families." "It's a trap," Blackthorn said from across the breakfast table. "Obviously." Clara set down the invitation. "The question is what kind?" "The public humiliation kind." He pushed his plate away, untouched. "Crestwood's losing ground. He needs to reassert dominance. A masquerade gives him home advantage, controlled environment, hand-picked guests, perfect setting for orchestrated disaster." "So we decline." "We can't." Blackthorn's jaw tightened. "If we refuse, we look scared. It confirms every rumor he's spreading, that we're unstable, defensive, hiding." Clara traced the edge of the invitation. "And if we attend, then we walk into whatever he's planned and hope we're smart enough to survive it." They looked at each other across the table. 2 months ago, Clara would have been terrified. Now she just felt a cold, calculating anger. "We go," she said, "but on our terms." Blackthorn leaned back. What do you have in mind? Information. Clara stood, began pacing. Crestwood thinks he knows us. Desperate newcomer, ruthless duke. He's planned around those assumptions, so we give him something he doesn't expect. Which is? Proof that we're not just surviving his attacks. We're thriving because of them. Clara stopped pacing. The reconstruction made us stronger. The fire gave us credibility. Every move he's made has backfired. We document that. Show the investors, the allies, everyone. Crestwood isn't just losing. He's making us more powerful with every attempt to destroy us. Blackthorn studied her for a long moment. That's ruthless. I learned from you. No. His voice softened. You learned to trust your own instincts. That's more dangerous than anything I could teach. The compliment settled warm in Clara's chest. But there wasn't time to examine it. They had 2 weeks to prepare for a trap designed to destroy them. They spent every waking hour planning. Mr. Carlyle compiled financial records showing Blackthorn Estate's growth since the fire. Increased productivity, improved profits, new contracts secured. Mrs. Daventry gathered testimonials from staff and tenants, documenting the positive changes under Clara's management. Vivian Hale sent intelligence about which guests would attend, who was solidly in Crestwood's camp, who was wavering. Lord Ashford provided insight into Crestwood's business dealings, the investments going sour, the partners growing restless, the mounting pressure from creditors. Clara absorbed it all, building a mental map of the battlefield they'd be walking into. He'll try to isolate us, she told Blackthorn the night before the masquerade. Separate us. Create situations where we look foolish or incompetent. So we don't separate. No, we do. Clara met his startled gaze. But strategically, cover more ground, handle different threats simultaneously. He's expecting us to cling together like frightened children. We show him we're strong individually. Blackthorn frowned. That's risky. Everything about this is risky. Clara moved to the window, staring out at the dark grounds. But we're past playing it safe. We either dominate this confrontation or spend the rest of our lives defending against his attacks. You sound like a general. Maybe I am one. She turned back. You built an empire. I'm just learning to defend it. He crossed to her, took her hands. It's not just my empire anymore. It's ours. The words should have felt overwhelming. Instead, they felt right. Clara lifted her chin. Then let's show Crestwood what happens when he attacks what's ours. The masquerade was held at Crestwood's London estate, a massive house in Belgravia that screamed old money and older power. Carriages lined the street, depositing elaborately costumed guests beneath torches that cast dancing shadows. Clara wore midnight blue silk and a mask of silver filigree that covered half her face. Beside her, Blackthorn was stark in black and white. His mask simpler, but no less striking. They entered together, and the crowd parted like water around stones. Duke Blackthorn, Duchess. Lord Crestwood appeared immediately, all false warmth and calculating eyes behind a golden mask. How delighted we are that you could attend. How could we refuse such a gracious invitation? Clara said smoothly. Crestwood's smile sharpened. Indeed. Please enjoy the festivities. There are so many interesting people here tonight. He disappeared into the crowd, leaving Clara with the distinct feeling they'd just been threatened. Stay sharp, Blackthorn murmured. It's starting. They moved through the ballroom, greeting allies, acknowledging rivals. Clara tracked faces behind masks, noting who watched them with curiosity versus hostility. Lord Pembroke stood near the champagne, looking sour. Lady Genevieve held court by the windows, her laughter too loud, too forced. Everywhere Clara looked, she saw potential enemies. But she also saw opportunity. There, she said quietly, nodding toward a cluster of older men. Investors. 3 of them pulled support from Crestwood last month. You want to talk to them? I want to remind them why they made that choice. Clara squeezed Blackthorn's arm. Go. Work the political side. I'll handle the financial. He hesitated. Clara, we discussed this. Trust me. Something fierce crossed his face. I do. Just be careful. Always. She watched him disappear into the crowd, then turned toward the investors with a confidence that was only half feigned. Gentlemen, may I join you? They turned, surprise evident even behind masks. Lord Whitmore, no relation to Clara's family, recovered first. Duchess Blackthorne, we were just discussing the excitement surrounding your estate lately. You mean the fire? Clara kept her voice light. Yes, that was unfortunate, but also illuminating. How so? Another investor, Baron Harding, leaned closer. It revealed our strengths. Clara accepted a champagne flute from a passing servant. Most estates would have taken 6 months to recover. We did it in 3 weeks, hired local workers, sourced regional materials, implemented safety standards that exceed requirements. The East Wing isn't just rebuilt, it's better. Impressive, Whitmore admitted, though expensive, surely. Investment, not expense. Clara met his gaze steadily. We've increased productivity 15%. Staff retention is at record highs. Tenant satisfaction has improved dramatically. The fire cost us, yes, but the response generated returns that'll compound for years. And your husband's business ventures? Harding asked carefully. Rumors suggest instability. Rumors spread by competitors who fear what we're building. Clara's voice sharpened deliberately. Duke Blackthorne has diversified holdings, solid contracts, and growing influence. Anyone claiming otherwise is either misinformed or lying. I'm happy to provide documentation if you'd like to see actual numbers instead of speculation. The men exchanged glances. That won't be necessary, Whitmore said slowly. Though I confess, Duchess, you're not what I expected. Good. Expectations are boring. Clara smiled. If you'll excuse me, gentlemen, enjoy the evening. She moved away, heart pounding, and nearly collided with Vivian. That was beautifully done, Vivian murmured. Confident without being aggressive, informative without being desperate. You've learned fast. Necessity is a harsh teacher. The harshest. Vivian glanced around. Crestwood's watching you. Whatever he's planning, it's coming soon. Let it come. Clara felt a strange calm settle over her. I'm ready. But she wasn't ready for what happened next. James Marlowe appeared at her elbow, looking nervous. Duchess, forgiveness for interrupting, but there's something you should see. What? A document. Crestwood's been showing it to select guests, claims it's evidence of fraud in your husband's business dealings. Ice flooded Clara's veins. Where? Marlowe led her through a side door into a smaller drawing room. Several guests stood around a table, examining papers spread across its surface. Clara pushed through, looked down. Contract documents, financial statements, and her stomach dropped. What looked like forged correspondence in Blackthorne's handwriting, suggesting illegal dealings with foreign investors. Forgeries, she said immediately. Perhaps. Lord Ashford stood nearby, expression grim. But convincing ones. The signatures look authentic. The dates match actual transactions. If these documents reach the authorities, he didn't need to finish. Even false evidence could destroy reputations, trigger investigations, unravel everything they'd built. Clara's mind raced. This was Crestwood's real attack. Not social humiliation, but legal destruction. He'd forged evidence, was disseminating it publicly, forcing them to defend against accusations that would follow them regardless of truth. Where's Dorian? She asked Ashford. Don't know. We separated 20 minutes ago. Of course they did. Because Crestwood had planned this perfectly, split them up, present evidence when Clara was isolated, unable to confer with Blackthorne before responding. She could deny it, claim forgery, demand investigations. But that would take time, and in that time doubt would spread like poison. No. She needed something better. Clara straightened, looked around at the assembled guests. Most watched with barely concealed anticipation, waiting for her to crack, to crumble, to prove she was exactly the desperate fraud Crestwood claimed. Gentlemen, she said clearly, ladies, you're looking at very expensive forgeries. Murmurs rippled through the room. How do you know? Someone called out. Because I manage Blackthorne's financial records. Clara moved to the table, started pointing at specific documents. This contract is dated March 15th, but Duke Blackthorne was in Scotland that entire week. I have travel records, witnesses, correspondence proving it. He couldn't have signed this in London. She pulled another paper forward. This statement claims funds transferred to a Marseille bank. But Blackthorne Estate doesn't use French banks. We use 3 specific institutions, all documented in public filings. Could be private accounts, someone suggested. Could be, But look at the signature. Clara traced the flourish at the bottom of the forged document. See that loop on the B? Duke Blackthorn's actual signature doesn't have that. His letters are sharper, more angular. Whoever forged this studied his writing but missed the subtleties. She looked up, met skeptical gazes. I can prove every word I've said. I have authentic documents, verified records, independent witnesses. Everything needed to demonstrate these are fabrications designed to damage our reputation. Then why would Lord Crestwood present them? Baron Harding asked. Because he's desperate. The voice came from the doorway. Blackthorn stood there, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. He moved forward, and people instinctively stepped back. Crestwood's been trying to destroy me for 8 years, Blackthorn said, voice cold as winter. Every legitimate attack failed, so now he's resorting to forgery, to lies, because he knows he can't beat us fairly. Strong accusations, Whitmore said carefully. Provable accusations. Blackthorn pulled a folder from his coat, tossed it on the table. That contains documented evidence of Crestwood's financial difficulties. 3 failed investments in 6 months. Creditors demanding payment. Partners abandoning his ventures. He's not attacking us out of principle. He's attacking because we're succeeding where he's failing. Silence fell. Then Lord Crestwood himself entered, face flushed behind his mask. This is slander. It's truth, Clara said calmly. Which is why you've been so desperate to discredit us. You thought a hasty marriage meant weakness, that a fire would break us, that forged documents would finish what you started. She stepped closer to him. You were wrong about all of it. You're nobody, Crestwood spat, his composure cracking. A fortune hunter who got lucky. You don't deserve— I've earned everything I have, Clara cut him off. I've worked harder in 3 months than you have in years. I've rebuilt what you tried to burn down. I've proven competence matters more than breeding. And yes, I've exposed you for exactly what you are, a desperate, bitter man watching his empire crumble while ours grows stronger. Crestwood's face went purple. You insolent— Careful, Blackthorn said quietly, but there was steel beneath it. Insult my wife again, and there will be consequences. The threat hung in the air. Lord Ashford stepped forward, breaking the tension. I think this matter is settled. The documents are clearly forgeries. Lord Crestwood, I strongly suggest you reconsider your tactics. This has gone beyond acceptable rivalry into something actionable. Other voices rose in agreement. Even Crestwood's allies looked uncomfortable, sensing they'd hitched themselves to a sinking ship. Crestwood looked around the room, saw his support evaporating. His mouth worked soundlessly. Then he turned and fled. The room exploded into conversation. Clara felt the adrenaline draining, leaving her shaky. Blackthorn was beside her immediately. Are you all right? I just publicly destroyed a peer of the realm, Clara said faintly. I think I'm supposed to feel guilty. Do you? She thought about it, about everything Crestwood had tried to do, the fire, the lies, the constant attacks. No, she said. I feel powerful. Blackthorn smiled, that rare, genuine expression that transformed his face. You should. That was extraordinary. Around them, people were approaching, offering congratulations, expressing support, distancing themselves from Crestwood's failed gambit. Vivian appeared, eyes bright behind her mask. You two just ended his career. You know that, right? After tonight, nobody will trust him. Good, Clara said simply. Lord Whitmore pushed through the crowd. Duchess, Duke, I owe you an apology. I believed Crestwood's implications about instability. I should have investigated before jumping to conclusions. You're investigating now, Blackthorn said. That's what matters. Indeed. Whitmore glanced at his fellow investors. We've been discussing, several of us would like to explore partnership opportunities with Blackthorn Estate. Your recent performance suggests you're precisely the kind of forward-thinking operation we should support. Clara's breath caught. This was more than vindication. This was victory. We're always interested in strategic partnerships, Blackthorn said smoothly. Let's schedule a meeting. The conversation flowed around them. Alliances forming, deals sketched, power redistributing like water finding new channels. Clara felt Blackthorn's hand find hers, squeezed gently. They'd won. Not just survived. Won. The carriage ride home was quiet. Clara leaned against Blackthorn's shoulder, exhausted but satisfied. "You were magnificent tonight," he said softly. "We were magnificent." No. That moment in the drawing room, dismantling Crestwood's evidence, turning the crowd, that was all you. He turned to face her. "I knew you were smart, but tonight I watched you become something else. A force." Clara's throat tightened. "I had a good partner." "The best." His hand cupped her face. "Clara, I need to tell you something." Her pulse quickened. "What?" "This stopped being convenient weeks ago. Somewhere between the fire and the reconstruction, between fighting Crestwood and building an empire together." He paused. "You stopped being a strategic choice and started being the only choice." Clara's eyes burned. "Dorian, I love you," he said quietly. "I don't know when it happened. Maybe gradually. Maybe all at once when you ran into that fire. But it's true. And I needed you to know." The words settled over Clara like sunlight breaking through clouds. She thought about the girl who'd accepted his proposal out of desperation, who'd been so certain this was just survival. That girl was gone. In her place was a woman who'd earned her power, who'd fought for her place, who'd built something real from nothing. A woman who'd fallen in love despite every intention otherwise. "I love you too," Clara whispered. "Even though I wasn't supposed to, even though this was supposed to be practical." "Nothing about us is practical." "No." She laughed through tears. "We're completely insane." "Works for me." He kissed her then, deep and claiming and full of promises neither had expected to make. When they finally pulled apart, the estate was visible in the distance, lights glowing warm against the darkness. Home. Not the prison Clara had feared. Not the transaction she'd agreed to. Home. The months that followed brought changes that rippled far beyond Blackthorn Estate. Clara's story spread. The nobody who'd become a duchess, who'd saved her husband from fire, who'd defeated powerful enemies through intelligence and courage. Women began citing her as proof that competence mattered more than connections. The reconstruction became a model for other estates. Clara received requests for consultation, advice, partnership. She accepted selectively, building a network that extended far beyond what Blackthorn had achieved alone. Crestwood's downfall was complete. His creditors closed in, his allies abandoned him, his reputation shattered. Within 6 months, he'd sold his estate and retreated to a small property in Scotland, broken. Clara felt no satisfaction in his destruction, just relief that the threat had passed. The estate thrived. New contracts, expanding operations, innovative approaches that pushed against traditional limitations. Clara and Blackthorn worked in tandem, his strategic mind, her operational brilliance, both of them learning to trust completely. They fought sometimes. Both were too stubborn, too used to independence. But they learned to fight fair, to compromise, to recognize that partnership meant neither always won. On their first anniversary, Blackthorn found Clara in the rebuilt East Wing, reviewing plans for a new community center she was funding. "Still working?" he asked. "Always." She looked up, smiled. "But I can take a break." He crossed to her, pulled her into his arms. "Remember when this was just a transaction? Vaguely. That was someone else's life. Was it worth it? All of this?" Clara thought about the fear and pain, the battles fought and won, the transformation from invisible girl to formidable duchess. "Every second," she said. They stood together in the wing Clara had rebuilt, in the estate they'd defended, in the life they'd created from desperation and determination. A year ago, Clara Whitmore had been nobody, overlooked, dismissed, drowning. Now she was Duchess Clara Blackthorn, powerful, respected, feared by some and admired by others. She'd earned every piece of that transformation, and she was just getting started. 2 years later, Clara stood before Parliament, one of the first women ever invited to address the Assembly on matters of estate management and economic reform. She wore dark green silk, her hair arranged simply, her expression calm. Around the chamber, men watched with curiosity, skepticism, some with open hostility. Clara didn't care. She'd faced worse. "Gentlemen," she began, voice carrying clearly, "I'm here to discuss a radical idea. That competence matters more than breeding, that intelligence matters more than tradition, that England's strength lies not in preserving the past, but in building a future that rewards merit. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Clara pressed forward. 3 years ago, I was nobody, a woman from a failing family facing a future of powerlessness and poverty. Today, I manage one of England's most successful estates, not because of my birth, because I was given opportunity and proved myself worthy of it. She looked around the chamber, meeting dismissive gazes head-on. How many other women, how many other people could do the same if given the chance? How much talent are we wasting by clinging to systems that prioritize accidents of birth over actual ability? This is Parliament, not a philosophy salon, someone called out. Then let's be practical, Clara shot back. Blackthorn Estate has increased productivity 37% in 3 years. We've implemented worker protections that improved both safety and efficiency. We've invested in community infrastructure that created jobs and stabilized the region. These aren't philosophical exercises. They're proven results. She pulled out documents, began citing numbers with the precision that had defeated Crestwood. Around the chamber, the skepticism began to crack. By the time she finished, half the assembly was taking notes. Lord Ashford found her afterward, grinning. You just terrified the old guard. Good. They should be terrified. Change is coming whether they accept it or not. You've become quite the revolutionary. I've become practical. Clara glanced back at the chamber. This system is broken. Either we fix it or watch it collapse. I prefer the first option. Blackthorn appeared, pride written clear on his face. The Prime Minister wants to meet. Something about consulting on labor reforms. Clara felt that familiar thrill. Opportunity, challenge, the chance to build something bigger. Then let's not keep him waiting. They walked through Parliament together. Partners, equals. A force that had reshaped not just an estate, but an entire approach to power. People watched them pass. Some with admiration, some with resentment, all with respect. Because Clara Blackthorn had proven something essential, that power wasn't inherited or given. It was earned, built, defended, and she'd earned every piece of hers. That evening, they stood on the terrace at Blackthorn Estate, watching sunset paint the grounds gold and crimson. The rebuilt east wing stood strong. The gardens flourished. In the distance, workers headed home from the new community center Clara had established. Do you ever miss it? Blackthorn asked quietly. Your old life? Clara laughed. The suffocating townhouse? The desperate matchmaking? The constant feeling of drowning? Fair point. I miss nothing about that life. She leaned into him. Everything we built, this is what I was supposed to become. I just needed the chance. I'm glad I gave it to you. I'm glad I took it. Clara turned to face him fully. We're going to change things, really change them. Not just our estate, the whole system. Ambitious. Necessary. Her eyes blazed. There are too many people like I was, capable, intelligent, trapped by circumstances. We're going to prove they deserve better. Blackthorn smiled, that full, genuine expression that still made Clara's heart skip. We're going to make a lot of enemies. We already have plenty. True. He kissed her forehead. Then let's make sure we're strong enough to survive them. We will be. Clara's voice rang with certainty. Because we're not just surviving anymore. We're building an empire, a real one, based on merit and strength and the kind of power that lasts. They stood together as darkness fell, two people who'd started as strangers in a desperate bargain and become something neither had imagined. Partners, equals, revolutionaries in elegant clothes. And this moment of peace before the next battle, was just the beginning, because Clara Blackthorn, once dismissed as nobody, had learned something essential. The world didn't give you power. You took it. You earned it. You built it from nothing but determination and the refusal to accept the limitations others tried to impose. She'd been invisible once, powerless, drowning in a world that had no place for her. Now she was rewriting the rules. And anyone who tried to stop her would learn what everyone else had learned, that the most dangerous person in any room wasn't the one born to power. It was the one who'd fought for every piece of it, and Clara Blackthorn was done fighting defensively. She was ready to change everything.